Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Brian from Valiant TCG, and today I wanted to show you guys a deck that I took with me to the nationals here in the Oceanic regions, and I ended up placing in the top 32 of the tournament, ended up at 22nd after Swiss. So unfortunately, my tiebreakers weren't strong enough for me to make it into the top 16 cut, but overall my score, I'm pretty happy with it. I lost my 2 rounds a little bit too early into the tournament, but I'm pretty happy with placing into the top 32. I managed to come out with these 2 amazing mats here. I have the Barbatos one and the Aerial one. Those were the 2 that I chose. I also have the amazing Armor Array prize card here, and of course the 10 sleeves that we get as well for top 32. And the deck that I decided to take with me is the same one as I did at the regional. I decided to take Justice Sinanju Red White. And I had a really good time playing this deck, as I did in the previous tournament as well. I love the concept of the deck. I made some small changes, so I just wanted to share with you guys my thoughts of the deck, some of the changes I decided to do with responses to the meta that I was expecting to play against. And yeah, let's get straight onto it. If you guys are interested in seeing my deck list before anything else, I'll have it up on the screen here for you guys to have a look. Feel free to pause or just even close the video here at this point. But I'll go ahead and talk to you guys about the decisions that I made in regards to what I wanted to play and how I wanted to respond to the meta. And afterwards, I'll give you guys a quick report on the decks I played against throughout the tournament. So I'm just going to split up the cards into packages so it's easier to share. I won't go into too much detail because I really didn't change that much in regards to what I decided to play compared to what I did at the regional in our previous video. So I won't talk too much in depth about some of the cards we decided to play. So to start off, we have 4 Lifrith, 4 Rick Diaz, and 3 Striker pack. So just like the early game low-cost blocker package. Our original iteration played exactly the same ratios, but for a small amount of time, we also considered playing Striker Pack at 4 because we thought that the burst out of life was extremely valuable. But there were a lot of games where I just saw too many of them in my hand, so we cut it back down to 3. And you do see it out of life every once in a while, and it's pretty game-changing, so we thought that this was quite strong. And just in general, having more blockers is just quite nice. You notice, again, I'm not playing Zawart because I'm playing Red-White. We have different options for our turn 1 play or turn 2 play. One of the main reasons why I wanted to play this deck, of course, we have our Justice package. So we have 4 copies of Justice, only 2 copies of Aegis Gundam this time, and of course our pilot for Athrun. So the main reason why I wanted to play the deck, again, Justice is just a really strong card. Pretty much every single white deck in our metagame at the moment is going to be playing some variation of Justice. Blue-white is playing it, green-white is playing it, red-white's playing it. It's just one of the craziest cards in the game at the moment, just because not only does it give you a really strong body that you can freely swing into your opponent, but it also spawns the 2/2 token. This guy is an absolute menace. If your opponent can't deal with the 2/2 token, they're going to have a hard game. So yeah, this card was fantastic. I really liked it. Of course, you had to play 4 Athrun because we're playing red. I decided to cut down Aegis from 3 to 2 because I was a little bit worried about aggro, and Hui convinced me to play just 2 copies because the only times that this is useful in an aggro matchup, if you're playing against green-blue, it will pretty much never be that useful unless you have it exactly with Athrun, which is kind of rare. And if you're playing against blue-purple, it can attack their Gujin, but other than that, it doesn't really do too much. So we cut it down to 2. The next package that we played is the Kira package. I played 4 copies of L-Strike, easily one of the best cards in the game at the moment, 2 copies of Sword Strike Gundam, and then of course 4 copies of Kira. Now in my original deck list, I didn't actually play the 2 copies of Sword Strike. We made some space for it because, again, we were expecting a lot of people to be playing either aggro, or if they weren't playing aggro, they were playing some variation of Justice. And this card here deals with the Justice token. It deals with pretty much every token that can spawn in an aggro matchup. And yeah, it was a very strong card for me. It proved very good. And because in my original list, I didn't actually play that many targets for Kira, now we have more units that can link with Kira, and that comes up quite often. Just to round out the units, I'm playing 4 copies of Sinanju and 2 copies of Full Frontal. Not much to say about this. Sinanju is just one of the best units in the deck, and Full Frontal for the occasional rush. It does come up quite a lot. If you do get the pairing, it's quite powerful on curve. I tended to go first throughout the day because I was a little bit worried about the aggro matchup, and playing him on turn 5 or turn 6 with the Full Frontal, it's a lot of pressure for your opponent, and if he can hide behind some of these chump blockers that you play throughout the beginning turns, he's going to be a menace throughout the game. So yeah, that was the ratio of, I guess, the units for the deck. Just to round out the cards here for the commands, played 4 copies of Close Combat. The main reason why I didn't play Zawart because I felt pretty safe with Close Combat, and this card is like pretty versatile. It lets you hit really cool numbers, and your opponent has to really respect this card if they find out you're playing red. So if I discarded red cards or played red cards earlier, they have to really respect Close Combat. And along the same veins, we also played 2 copies of Battle of Aces. Same thing. If your opponent is aware that you're playing red, you have to be kind of careful, or they have to be kind of careful around it. The 3 damage is extremely relevant. They can't swing their Gundams too freely into your board, so a lot of people were wising up to attacking into blockers in that regard, especially if I had 2 resources standing. And the last 2 commands that I played were 2 copies of Overflowing Affection. This might seem a little bit weird because I'm only playing 2, but I took Hui's advice. Instead of playing more consistently, which is a little bit of a gamble, instead of playing more consistently, I decided to play more power cards. This is how I managed to fit in the 2 Sword Strike Gundams that I didn't have originally. So the new card that we decided to play was a card that was released in the new starter deck. It was 3 copies of Valiant. So I'll have the card on the screen here for those who don't know what this is. This is from starter deck number 8. On deploy, you add a shield to your hand, and then you can choose one of your units against +2 AP. Now that +2 AP came up quite a lot for me throughout the tournament, and honestly, this was a bit of an MVP for me. A lot of the times you will have a blocker that is either rested or standing, and if your opponent attacks into your shields and happens to burst this out of life, it can be extremely awkward for them to attack into your board, especially if they're trying to do things like push with Gundam Amuro. If you are lucky enough to get this out of your shields, it makes your blocker be able to protect against Gundam Amuro because your Rick-Diaz will become a 5/3 unit, so it can be pretty crazy in that regard. But it came up a lot when I was trying to crack back against my opponent. If my opponent is swinging with their L-Strike, and if you have a Rick-Diaz on board, you'll be able to just play Valiant, give it a +2 boost, turn it into a 5, and then just trade it off the board. And it's extremely efficient. You're not really losing a card off of playing the base 2 because you draw it out of your shield, and then you can trade off a big unit without using a pilot. And it came up, again, quite a lot for me. This base was insane, and I liked it a lot more than Vesalius, which I no longer played. Just around the last 2 cards, I do play 2 copies of Rulua. This was a card that I didn't originally play, but I really liked it. The 1 damage was extremely relevant. I didn't really appreciate the card until I started playing it a little bit more in practice. It lets you hit really cool numbers. There's a lot of units that only have 4 HP, so you can punish a lot of weird plays with Rulua into Battle of Aces. There's a lot of really weak units in the game, so you can get rid of it with Rulua plus Close Combat. And if your opponent is playing a lot of tokens, for example, in the aggro matchups, the Char token is 3/1. The Rulua also gets rid of that, and of course, gets rid of the Corsica-based tokens again, the 1/1 Leo tokens. So this is the list I decided to play. Not really too many changes, just adjusting some ratios and adding in Sword Strikes to address what we thought was going to be very meta. It's very good into aggro, and it's also very good into a meta game where a lot of people were playing Justice Gundam to get rid of the token. So next up, I want to talk about some of the matchups I played throughout the day. I actually played a pretty good variety of matchups. I played a few mirrors, I played green-white, I played against a few blue-whites, and a bunch of random aggro decks throughout the day. And I can quickly give you guys a general idea of how I approached a lot of these matchups. Just to start off in general, when it comes to playing any of these matchups, I wanted to talk a little bit about the mulliganing that I did. I wanted to try to go for 2 pieces of defensive tools, so either a form of 2 blockers, or perhaps blocker plus Close Combat. This way, it makes it so then like I have a good way to survive at least the initial onslaught of any of the cards that might be played against me. The blockers obviously are very good to stop early aggression, and Close Combat allows you to remove the threats before they even do anything. I really liked mulliganing for this particular combination of defensive tools because if you don't know what your opponent's playing, Close Combat will get rid of a really high tempo cards such as Zaku 2 and Barbator's First Form, which I actually did play a lot of blue-purple throughout the day. So this is what I usually mulligan for, and then the rest of the hand, you kind of just have to hope that you draw the right pieces throughout the day. And because my deck does play 10 pilots, I will be able to eventually link in most of my games. Just to start off, I played against a few red-white mirrors. The first thing that I like to prioritize in the red-white mirror is trying to establish my Sinanju very safely. If I'm able to park a Sinanju behind a few blockers, this will be able to give me a lot of tempo. I'll be able to remove their cards before they can do too much, and in combination with Sinanju plus any kind of other ping, you'll be able to steamroll that matchup if you are able to stabilize. So this is a very big priority, and I like to also see if I can get myself into an Aegis Gundam. Aegis Gundam is just extremely powerful into pretty much any white deck because all of the main win cons are higher than level 5. So these cards were extremely valuable. This kind of strategy applies to pretty much every matchup that is a bit slower. So against green, white, and blue, white, these two cards are probably some of the best cards that you will end up drawing. But of course, I only had 2 copies of the Aegis. This wasn't a reliable win condition, but whenever I saw it in my hand, I had to be very careful with discarding it or playing it out because I really didn't want it to die to an Amuro. Same thing with the Sinanju. If you lose it to an Amuro, it's very painful. Against the aggro matchups, of course, you want to try to stabilize by removing their threats before they can attack. So this is where L Strike Gundam and Sword Strike Gundam are very effective alongside your other red cards like Close Combat. These 2 cards are very good into decks that have a lot of tokens or they like to swing out on your base, especially if you're able to pair it up with Kira. Kira being able to do -2 AP makes it so then you can clear board without trading too much damage so you can avoid getting pinged down by their units. So that is kind of the general game plan. Against a slower deck, you want to try to establish your blockers and then play down some of your strongest red units. And against the faster matchups, you want to try to just remove the threats as soon as possible and then slowly whittle them down. Just to round things off, I have to talk about the best card in the deck, Justice Gundam. If you are able to play this card back to back to back, your opponent is going to have a lot of issues dealing with you because Justice, he kind of already does his job when you play him. You get a token that your opponent has to kind of get rid of in some respect. The 2/2 token, even though it doesn't really do that much, just protects your whole board, especially if you already have a Sinanju or maybe a Sword Strike Gundam that they have to try to get rid of. Now they have to get rid of another layer of protection before they can push through those units. And then afterwards too, Justice Gundam will be able to swing for 5 damage each turn. If your opponent blocks it, if your opponent takes a life, if your opponent trades into it, it doesn't matter. Like, he's already done his job, and pretty much everybody that I talked to that did play Justice Gundam said the same thing. They just said that this card was just a menace across the entire tournament. It just gave so much value, and you don't really care if your opponent gets rid of him. He's kind of done his work already. And just one more thing that I wanted to talk about regarding Justice Gundam. I actually didn't use Justice Athrun immediately that many times. Unless my opponent had more than 3 units on board, I didn't immediately use the Athrun pairing to attack a standing unit. Sometimes your opponent doesn't have a threat on board that requires you to use Athrun, and thankfully in this deck there's a lot of different uses for this pilot. Of course, other than just instantly pairing it with Justice, you are able to put this with Aegis Gundam and being able to do 3 damage to a level 5 or higher unit, and attacking a standing unit is very powerful. You can also pair it with the Sinanju, giving it high maneuver, which is extremely relevant in a metagame with a lot of blockers. And then for our L Strike, of course, it still counts to bounce a unit. So it will not only bounce a unit, it does cause it to have 6 HP, which allows you to play around Amuro. And being able to play around Amuro is extremely annoying for any blue matchup. Talking about playing around Amuro, if you decide to play the other blockers in the form of Striker Pack or Lifrith, if you pair up Athrun with any of these two, will give it 6 HP and again be able to defend from Amuro. So those were my general insights into some of those matchups. I know it's not the most detailed explanation, but that was the general strategies that I kind of employed throughout the day. So these were the actual specific matchups I ended up playing against, and I'll put it on screen here. My 2 losses, one of them was against Blue-Purple. This one was a little bit unfortunate. I just kind of lost because he drew the exact out off of a show resolve. He needed a rush unit, and he show resolved into the rush unit, and unfortunately I lost there. And against Blue-White, my loss here was a little bit unfortunate. It was one of the few times I actually bricked throughout the tournament. In this game, I drew a single L Strike as my level 5 or higher unit, and the rest of the cards I drew were either pilots or level 3 or lower blockers. So it's really hard to win against Blue-White when all of your units aren't very big, and you kind of just slowly lose from there. Against the rest of the matchups, I think a lot of the games were pretty back and forth. I enjoyed a lot of those games. My opponents were very strong. It felt like every single game wasn't exactly a steamroll. I didn't draw perfect, and my opponents sometimes drew really strong. I just had to try to maximize the value of the cards as much as I could to kind of win the game. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and I guess my tournament recap. If you guys want to see more from me, please do let me know in the comments. I do plan on releasing some more videos talking a little bit more specifically about this deck and how I've approached specific matchups and how I make the most out of the cards that I draw. So if you guys are interested in seeing that, please do subscribe to the channel. Yeah, managed to make top 32 at the Nationals. Pretty happy. A bit unfortunate I couldn't make top 16 to play in the top cut, but despite losing 2 early game rounds, making top 32 is pretty good. So no complaining there. Appreciate you guys for watching the videos. Please do like and subscribe like I said, and see you guys in the next video.